Saudi Arabia is the world's largest producer of desalinated water, where researchers have patented several technologies to extract minerals from water while protecting marine ecosystems from wastewater.
Nearly 98% of Saudi Arabia is made up of deserts. Shifting dunes, scorching heat, and no water in sight. But through sheer engineering skills and lots of money, the kingdom is building rivers through this harsh landscape. They are drawing water from the ocean and delivering it hundreds of miles away to urban centers. And the star of the show is these metal pipes, snaking through deserts and climbing mountains thousands of feet high. And how they made it possible is absolutely insane. Shaped by thirst. Saudi Arabia is one of the most water-scarce countries in the world. Most of the country gets an average yearly rainfall of less than 3 inches. There are no lakes, no perennial rivers, and a very limited supply of groundwater. Just imagine that for a moment. Living in a place where rain is a gift, and water is a precious resource that must be used sparingly. How do you survive in those conditions? Well, historically, Saudi Arabia relied on 3 sources for its water. Scattered throughout the region are deep fossil aquifers, ancient water that has been sitting there for centuries, as well as shallow aquifers that get filled up with rain. And then there is the surface water that comes from the mountainous southwest. But here is the problem. The amount of water coming from these sources is not enough to meet the demand for Saudi Arabia. And while the shallow aquifers and the water from the southwest are renewable, the deep fossil aquifers are not. Once those run out, it will take thousands of years before they even begin getting refilled naturally. Saudi Arabia had to work around this limitation for most of its history. The country's past is shaped by this shortage. In most cities, including major urban hubs like Jeddah and Riyadh, you could only get water after days or even a week. This limited urban expansion and industrial development severely. Agriculture also took a major hit. In the 70s, Saudi Arabia tried to move towards self-sufficiency in food, and to achieve that, they used up their limited water supply to water their crops. The results were devastating. Water levels in the deep aquifers dropped at an alarming rate. In the end, production of water-intensive crops like wheat had to be stopped completely, and Saudi Arabia began importing its food once again. The Saudi government knew this was not going to be sustainable. Everything in an economy hinges on water. Many industries need it to function. Construction requires this valuable resource in abundance. And most importantly, energy production requires water cooling. Without a sustainable and adaptable water source, the kingdom could not enter an economic boom. First, they tried to fix the problem by saving water. The government launched aggressive awareness campaigns in the media and used educational programs. They distributed water-saving appliances. And, well, it worked a bit. Water usage went down by a quarter in cities like Riyadh. Agriculture subsidies were cut, the water provision systems were made more efficient, and citizens were encouraged to use less water. But the overall impact was minimal. Saudi Arabia was growing. The population was increasing, and they needed a new infrastructure to support that growth. A city like Jeddah, as it is today, would not be possible without a more reliable water supply. When saving water didn't get the job done, the Saudi government decided they find an alternative water source instead. And that's where the thought struck. Saudi Arabia is exposed to the ocean from 3 sides. Why not use that? And that idea alone is what led to the creation of the world's longest freshwater pipeline, which crosses deserts and cuts through mountains. An endless supply. Seawater is not fit for human use, that much everyone knows. But why is that the case? The main culprit is salt. Seawater is salty, and the amount of water it takes for the human body to deal with that salt and flush it out is more than what you are consuming. So by drinking salt water, the human body actually becomes dehydrated. Additionally, seawater is not usable for agriculture either, since most crops cannot deal with the high mineral and salt contents. So how do you use it? Well, making the undrinkable drinkable is no easy task. But Saudi Arabia had no other choice. It was this or falling behind the world. So they turned to the tried and tested method of turning seawater into fresh water, called thermal distillation desalination. Desalination is a process that humans have relied upon for pretty much as long as we have been around. You take some seawater, put it in a container, and boil it. The water turns to steam, leaving the salt behind. Meanwhile, the steam condenses and turns back into water. It's a simple process, yet one that has sustained humanity for hundreds of thousands of years when no other water source was available. You just need to scale it up, and you get what's fueling Saudi Arabia's water production today: water desalination plants. These plants are large-scale setups that work on the same principle we just talked about. There are massive tankers of seawater that are boiled up using coal or some other fuel source, and the resulting steam is then condensed into water to be used. This was it, the perfect solution for Saudi's problem. And so, the construction began. The first thermal distillation plant that Saudi Arabia built was the Al-Qandasa. Built in Jeddah in 1907, its name literally means condenser. Powered by coal, this beast was able to produce 300 tons of fresh water every day for Jeddah. For Saudi Arabia, it was the first of its kind, a solution that could help mitigate the water shortages, especially during the Hajj season, when an influx of pilgrims comes to the holy cities of Mecca. Al-Qandasa was expected to sustain Jeddah on its own, but unfortunately, that 300 tons wasn't enough to meet the needs of the growing city. Yet still it served as a proof of concept. The Al-Qandasa had proven that water desalination is a viable way to source water from the sea. What followed was a construction spree in the kingdom. Plant after plant was put up to meet the ever-growing need for water in the Saudi economy and population. Al-Waj and Duba plants were built in 1969. The Jeddah plant started operation in 1970, and the Khobar plant began pumping out fresh water in 1973. The number of desalination plants in the kingdom kept on growing until in 2025 there were 33 such plants operating in the country. 8 of these plants are on the coast of the Arabian Gulf, while the other 25 are installed on the coast of the Red Sea. And combined, they are producing 5.6 million cubic meters of fresh water every single day. What started out as a failed project in Jeddah paved the way for Saudi Arabia to become the largest producer of desalinated water in the world. Of all the desalinated water produced in the world, Saudi Arabia produces 22% of it. The crown jewel of Saudi Arabia's desalination empire is Ras Al Khair. Not only is it the largest desalination plant in Saudi Arabia, it's also the largest in the world. Other important plants fueling the country with fresh water are the Jubail complex, Shoaiba complex, and the Shuqaiq plants. Most of these are run by the government under the control of the Saline Water Conversion Corporation, established by King Faisal in 1974 as an independent government institution. Meanwhile, some of the plants are run by the private sector, who operate separately from the government. And the growth isn't stopping. The country is planning to install more and more of these in the near future as its industries and population keep expanding. And for these new plants, the old desalination method is not cutting it. They are employing a new system, one that isn't just more efficient but also safer. A new way. For the longest time, Saudi Arabia relied on thermal-based desalination. While it is effective and quite efficient, there are 2 main problems with it. First of all, it is extremely energy-intensive, requiring a lot of fuel or electricity to produce the heat needed. And secondly, it produces a high-temperature brine as a discharge, which isn't great for the environment when released into the ocean. Saudi Arabia did try to fix the energy problem with a more efficient method for desalination called multi-effect distillation, and a few plants use it instead. However, it still isn't the best method possible, because there is a very different method for removing salt from water called reverse osmosis, and it is way more energy efficient and safer for the environment. So how does it work? Reverse osmosis does not use heat to separate water from the impurities. Instead, it utilizes pressure. So basically, the plant uses these specialized filters that have semi-permeable membranes within them. These membranes have pores so tiny that only the water molecules, which are smaller in size, can pass through them. No salt or bacteria can get through. These things are a real feat of engineering. The water is forced through these filters at an immense pressure, causing the salt to separate on a molecular level. And there are quite a few reasons why this desalination technique is becoming so popular in Saudi Arabia. The main reason is the energy efficiency. This process requires way less energy than thermal-based desalination. And since no fuel is being burned directly, there are no carbon emissions to worry about. Lastly, the whole rig can be scaled more easily since these kinds of plants are modular, meaning more filters can be added at any time. Since the development of this method, RO desalination plants have been popping up all across Saudi Arabia. Chief among them is the Rabigh 3 IWP, the largest reverse osmosis plant in the world. This plant alone can pump out 600,000 cubic meters of water every day. Ras Al Khair Power and Desalination Plant is another major plant in Saudi Arabia, which falls into the hybrid category using both reverse osmosis and thermal technology. This beast can produce over 1 million cubic meters of fresh water a day. With the emergence of the RO technology, the water production in Saudi Arabia has ramped up. Literally, rivers worth of water is being produced in the kingdom daily. And that creates the next big hurdle in bringing water to every home in Saudi Arabia. How do you transport this river from the ocean, through the desert and tall mountains all the way to the cities? Exporting lifeblood? The issue of transporting the fresh water from these massive plants to urban centers was a major hurdle for Saudi Arabia. In the past, the capacity of these plants was small, so delivery trucks were enough to get the water to the cities from the coast. But now, that was no longer viable. Truck transportation was far too slow to keep up. And so, the Riyadh Water Transmission System was born. As water pipelines were being built all across the kingdom, this water transmission system was going to be the largest, most important piece in the puzzle. Bridging the distance between the Arabian Gulf and Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. The vision was grand. A 290 miles long system of double pipelines that would carry a river's worth of water every single day. About 830,000 cubic meters of water to be exact. Each pipeline was planned to be about 5 feet wide, made of steel with the insides lined with cement mortar. The task was going to be tough. In the desert, building anything becomes so much more complicated. But for Saudi engineers and builders, it is something they have gotten used to. The sections of the pipes were installed one after the other. In some parts of the planned route, the temperatures soared to extreme limits, making it impossible to work during the noon. But still, the shifts were adjusted and the work continued. Over hills and mountains, the pipeline kept expanding, until eventually it reached its destination in Riyadh, supplying the town with the lifeblood it needed to thrive. Pumping the water through this pipeline were 5 intermediate pump stations and a head station, creating a high-pressure environment for the quick delivery of the water. This made it the first closed high-pressure pipeline system for water transportation in the world. And there is a good reason why this had to be a closed system instead of a canal or artificial river. The scorching desert heat means that conventional water transportation systems like canals were not going to cut it. The water would evaporate during the travel from the coast to the city, reducing the output. Whereas in a pipe, even when the water heats up, it turns to steam and condenses back down, reducing the wastage to the absolute minimum. Due to its ingenious design, the Riyadh Water Transmission System became a technical model for how pipelines needed to be made for the unique environment in Saudi Arabia. And so, it became the blueprint for the next major such pipeline built, called the Makkah-Taif Transmission System. This system brings in water from the Red Sea, demineralizes it, and brings it to Taif and Mecca to be used. The pipeline stretches 124 miles and acts as an important resource for helping provide water to the pilgrims who come to the Islamic holy city of Mecca during the pilgrimage. But it's not like the Riyadh water transmission system and the Makkah Taif transmission system are the only ones. The kingdom operates a complex net of pipelines connecting desalination plants with urban centers and villages around the country. The numbers are staggering. There are roughly 11,200 miles of pipelines connecting 22,000 population centers. That's nearly as long as the Nile, the Amazon, and the Yangtze rivers combined. Some of these pipelines elevate as high as 9,800 feet when crossing over mountains. That's higher than most ski resorts, high enough for mountain climbers to begin experiencing altitude sickness. And flowing through these pipelines is an absurd amount of water. 16.6 million cubic meters of water flow through this system every single day, making Saudi Arabia the world's top producer of desalinated water. At the same time, the water pressure within is kept just right. Not too much that it makes the pipeline burst, nor so little that the water is unable to climb the extreme heights some of the pipelines reach. The whole system operates on a perfect balance. It's all a true marvel of engineering. But the question is, what's powering it all? After all that water needs energy to move. The pumps that are working day and night require a huge amount of energy to make this possible. Where is Saudi Arabia getting that energy? Powering the heart. The uncomfortable truth about desalination is that it is an extremely power-hungry process. And for Saudi Arabia, this is a huge problem. Right now, nearly a quarter of the nation's oil and gas production is used to create fresh water. That's billions of dollars worth of resources that can be exported are being literally burned for the sake of water. And if these plants keep on being built at the rate they are, they will only eat up more of the pie. By 2030, water desalination plants are expected to consume 50% of the kingdom's oil and gas production. Now that certainly won't make the nation poor, but it will be a huge hit to the profitability of the most important industry to Saudi Arabia's survival. So how do you deal with that? Well, there are only two viable ways that can be done. First, by increasing the efficiency of the water desalination system. And that is being done already. Most of the new desalination plants being built use the RO technology, which is far less energy hungry than the thermal desalination process. But there is one problem. The Saudi government cannot simply shut down the old thermal plants since they are a major contributor to the water supply system. They would need to be replaced, not shut down, just to save fuel. So it will take decades for RO technology to completely phase out the thermal desalination plants still operating in the country. At the same time, the Saudi government is looking into even more efficient ways for water desalination that are still in development. There is an absorption desalination method that incorporates advanced absorption cooling technology and salt crystallization to remove salt from water. This method is still in the testing phase for industrial use in Saudi Arabia. Another emerging process is nanotech membranes. These membranes will work similarly to RO technology. They function by having water forced through an even finer mesh of pores compared to RO filters to remove an even higher amount of salt. Not only that, but these new filters are designed to allow for a faster flow of water through them, making the filtration process faster and less energy-consuming, as less pressure is required to push the water through. These innovations will certainly help reduce the energy consumption of the desalination plants across the kingdom. But they aren't going to be the only way Saudi Arabia reduces its reliance on fossil fuels for powering its water production. And that's because the country as a whole is moving towards green energy for its power needs, and desalination plants are no exception. The Saudi government is building solar farms to power these integral assets to reduce the reliance on coal, oil, and gas. And these farms are a total game changer. Plants like the Al-Khafji are completely self-sufficient, using only solar power to operate at full capacity. Meanwhile, other major plants like the Jubail 3A and Yanbu 4 are semi-reliant on solar power, helping reduce their total emissions significantly. The two main components of the Saudi water supply systems, the plants and the pumps that push the water through the pipelines, are both being slowly turned completely self-reliant using solar technology. And once that mission is accomplished, the landscape in the region may be completely different. We could see Saudi Arabia turning greener than ever in history. Agriculture could return to the land, helping the kingdom become self-sufficient for food. Construction projects could speed up, and the quality of life for the citizens will improve significantly as well. Saudi Arabia is doing what no one else in the world has been able to. They have harnessed the power of the ocean to turn a desert into an oasis. But playing with nature has its own consequences. And for these desalination plants, those consequences are turning deadly. The dark side of water. The desalination process isn't exactly harmless for nature in more than one way. The first problem is the salt itself, which is separated from the water. This discharge, containing the bacteria, salt, and heavy metals from the water, is called brine. And brine basically kills any creature it touches, especially in the ocean. Most of the plants operating 24/7 in the kingdom simply dump the brine produced back into the ocean. And this is creating dead zones where no fish or marine life can survive. Pools of sea brine are forming at the bottom of the sea in the region, killing key species that are vital for sustaining the ecosystem. Seagrasses, corals, and invertebrates all die off en masse, which form the very base of oceanic food chains. All this is causing the biodiversity in the regions surrounding the desalination plants to plummet. Additionally, the brine being dumped into the ocean tends to be hotter than the ocean temperature. That raises the overall temperature in the water, which can also cause some species to die off, migrate, or behave strangely. And considering Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE are the world's largest producers of brine, it paints a very dark picture. The area most at risk from this brine pollution is the Red Sea. Being a rather isolated part of the ocean where the water doesn't mix with the rest of the world's ocean by a lot, the brine being dumped here is raising the ocean's salinity by a significant margin. What it means for the creatures inhabiting the region and for the overall health of the oceans, no one is certain just yet. What we do know is that it certainly isn't going to be good. Oceans are very, very complicated ecosystems. Something as small as temperature or salt level imbalance can have grave consequences. So how do we avoid that? Thankfully, Saudi Arabia is already working on some solutions. One technique being used is called zero liquid discharge. Instead of just dumping liquid brine, an evaporating process is included in the waste management process, where all the moisture is evaporated, leaving behind a solid chunk of salt and minerals that can be further recycled or processed into other products. Another method for utilizing this brine productively is extracting valuable minerals like calcium, bromide, magnesium, lithium, and rare earth elements from it. Another way Saudi Arabia is fighting against brine pollution is through advanced discharge technologies. This method involves disposing of the brine in areas of the ocean where it will do minimal harm or be dissolved into the ocean more effectively and more quickly, so there are no dead zones created. These are all effective ways to manage brine pollution can be managed not just in Saudi Arabia, but also in the rest of the world, where desalination plants are a need. Saudi Arabia's solution for its water shortage is an inspiration for the rest of the world. Their water distribution system, using high-pressure pipelines, serves as a blueprint not just for the other projects in the kingdom, but also for the rest of the world. Other countries where water is a rare resource can follow the lead of the kingdom to create their own such systems for water purification and distribution. Do you think desalination is the perfect solution to water scarcity? Or does its cons outweigh its pros? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts.